Cryptography is all about secret keys that need high-quality entropy to be truly random. NetRandom from Whitewood Security delivers pure quantum entropy on demand across the entire data center and out to the cloud. Think NTP, but for quantum entropy. Inoculate your applications from making weak crypto keys, all without having to change a line of code. Visit getnetrandom.com to learn how you can take control of your entropy supply and ensure crypto security today. Signal Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, protecting applications, connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/PSW. Onapsis is the leading provider of solutions to protect ERP systems from cyber attacks. Customers can secure their SAP and Oracle business-critical platforms from espionage, sabotage, and financial fraud risks. Visit them on the web at onapsis.com. The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network. Welcome, everyone, to this interview segment on Paul Security Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Sidorian. I'm joined by Mr. Jeff Mann and Mr. Doug White, who are both on the lines via Skype for this segment. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome. That's
Hello.
Dr. Doug White, by the way.
Dr. Doug White. Dr. Doug is here with us. Dr. White. Doctor. Thanks, guys, for joining us today. I want to introduce our special guest for today, Gadi Evron, founder and CEO of Cymmetria, chair of Global Task Forces, miscreant puncher / threat hunter, sci-fi geek, and dance teacher. Gadi, welcome to the program today.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's nice to have you on. Gadi, for our audience, why don't you do us a favor and please describe your background, pretty much how you got started in InfoSec and how you came to be the illustrious security person you are today.
Illustrious.
You are illustrious.
I think I like that. Well, there you go. So, got started and my career are two different things. So let's just go with got started. I've been all over the place just like you, right?
That's right.
I got started on IRC. I've always been involved in security, but then one day on IRC, people started sending script.ini when you were using MIRC. And script.ini was really interesting. It was the basics of security for me in a way that, number one, your chat program would immediately receive it upon sending. Number two, it would save it to the MIRC home directory. Number three, when MIRC or MIRC would load up, it would automatically load script.ini. So you have this trifecta combination of getting the first IRC worm, which really started the whole new age of Trojan horses that we're facing today.
That's right.
That is how
could you execute? Now, could script.ini execute operating system commands? Was that the deal with that?
It was a really cool scripting language. You can do pretty much anything you wanted with it.
Gotcha.
It didn't have some basics like for loops, but other than that, it could do anything.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about your founding role in Cymmetria and what do you do today?
Sounds good. So I'll go through that quickly. I've been involved in security for a long time. I've been a practitioner, I've been a CISO, I've been in startup. And one day I just got frustrated with our industry and I was looking to do something different. I was looking to win. I think we are a very defeatist industry, going to work every morning knowing we're going to lose. And it came down to economics. How do we shift that economics around? For me, that's cyber deception. And that is what we do with Cymmetria.
That's awesome. I find that the best startups are those of us in the community that got frustrated and said, I'm gonna go solve a problem. I'm gonna go try and solve maybe the problem, right, based out of our experiences. So that's really awesome. Now, Gadi, you and I were talking recently, and I know you've talked with John Strain extensively about cyber deception, as they call it, right? We call it offensive countermeasures is another term, but effectively applying some of the techniques that we have on offense to some of the techniques that we have on defense. And there's been a lot of research in this field, and one of the things that you came out with recently is, I think is a fresh take on the concept of hacking back. And I know we said hacking back. Oh my God, everyone's all up in arms. So why don't you set the stage for us, Gadi? Talk a little bit about traditional hacking back and some of the reactions people have to that, and then segue into the methodology and tool that you've put in place today.
Sure. So I'll start with where you just started, hacking back. Whenever people mention that it's taboo, it's a buzzword, it's muddied waters, it's a loaded term. You say hack back, I say no. And it really happened to me many, many times over the year. People say, hey man, how about hack back? I say, no, it's bad. And the reasons for that are pretty clear. To recap very quickly, attribution is very, very hard.
Mm-hmm.
You might not know who you're really hitting. You have third parties that might have been taken over. There is the issue of collateral damage, the issue of how do you actually have the capabilities of actually making it happen. It's illegal, it's unethical, we shouldn't do it. Honestly, when we hear hackback, we're thinking about let's follow the guy home and beat him up. And that's our problem. Hackback is a loaded term. What we need to do is to ask ourselves instead not why we can't do it, but rather what can we do? And that is the question we were trying to answer when two of our Fortune 500 customers came to us and said, hey, we want to be able to actively engage. We want to be able to hack back. And we had to really sit down and define what they wanted to do and understand, hey, you know what? If we actually stop and say, what does the CFAA say? What do other laws and methodologies out there say, regulations say? What can we actually do? Can we actually engage? Can we actually achieve what we want to achieve without breaking the law? And that is how we came up with this new product.
That's awesome. So, I mean, when we look at hacking back, and specifically you mentioned the CFAA goes both ways, right? Someone's breaking into my network. I can't then take that information and go break into their network. That act of accessing a computer system in an unauthorized manner is a violation of the CFAA. So how do we get around those limitations? And also, you mentioned the attribution problem. I may not be breaking back into the attacker system. I could be breaking into someone else's system the attacker just happens to have access to.
Absolutely. My favorite example for that is a hospital or a pacemaker. You just broke into a pacemaker, man. What's wrong with you? So the first thing to understand is that the CFAA, and I believe this is pretty much acknowledged, is probably one of the worst technology laws in existence. I'm not saying it was set up to be that way, but it's very much out of touch with reality. And that has to change. That said, that is not necessarily what we want to do today. Today, we want to understand what can we actually do. So to get to it, what if we started by saying, let's limit ourselves to your network, nothing else? That shouldn't be a problem, right? That should be completely legal. For example, if somebody just broke into your machine in your network, you're using cyber deception, meaning you're able to now see their connection live. They're using a computer you own to connect to a computer you set up. So why not just connect back to that computer using administrative password, meaning to set the parameters, you just use the computer that's under your authority, you own it, with authority that you have over that computer, meaning your administrative password. There shouldn't be anything illegal with that, right? Would you agree with that?
I agree with that. Not sure what.
I agree with
All
that.
right.
Okay, Doug agrees with that.
So
That's
far,
good.
so good.
Okay, so I'll say we can challenge that point, but let's just accept it as real for right now and accept it's legal. We're not lawyers and everything, and move on. What happens with BYOD? What happens when it's a contractor who is connected with his own computer? That is something you're starting to think, wait, there is some middle ground there that we're not really clear about. For example, what do you do with an iPhone that's been stolen? It's now in the possession of the thief, but you have control. You can brick that device. So let's draw a matrix in a way. Top left corner is it's my control and my ownership, so-called. Top bottom corner on the right would be it's their computer and their control, meaning, for example, their base of operations. I can't do anything there. Would you also agree with that? Legally today, I'm not an enforcement agency. Can I go and break to their computer that they control?
No.
The answer would be no.
No.
So the middle,
I say
yeah.
no.
So the middle ground is where it gets interesting. What do I do with BYOD? What do I do with the contractor's computer? But more important than that, there are some things we may not have thought of. For example, under the CFAA, if they smuggle a computer, they being attackers, smuggle a computer on your network right now, let's say even a Raspberry Pi, you can go and kick that device if you actually know where it is, but you cannot access it digitally. That would be the same as breaking into a hospital outside of your network. There is no relation to intent. There is no relation to location. So when I look at the CFAA right now, let's not look at the regulations and laws for a second. What we have is the ability to act under some cases, a policy model that's required, and that's essentially the legal framework that we released at Cymmetria to be able to do this product, of how do you approach something when there is middle ground? How do you know what you're allowed to do or not allowed to do? And then the things that you're not allowed to do. Then, of course, you can do a lot more than that. For example, you can extend your legal parameter by going, for example, and using honeydocs that the attacker can download. But to bring this all together, the idea is the following. Number one, with our tool, you can now engage with an attacker live, do forensics much faster. Nobody will argue with that. Number two, you are actually not just collecting forensics faster, you can engage with a live attacker, which is something that we don't often do, especially not automatically. Third, we can, for example, steal their tool set. If I connect to a box that's connecting to me right now, again, it's under my control, I'm allowed to do that, and I run netstat and I check, hey, who opened up that port connecting to me right now? Which process? Here's the PID. Great, I just stole their tool set. I extended my forensics and incident response capabilities to the attacker's side, which brings me back to the beginning, where I'll end this, where we started with hackback being a muddy term. It's very, very difficult. We, for example, when we tried to talk about this capability, people would immediately throw it in our faces. This is hackback. And we said, no, it's really not. Let's talk about this. And we tried to get away from the term. What we ended up needing to do is understanding we need to own the term. We need to say legal hackback, even though I cringe a little bit, to be able to open up the discussion the industry actually needs to have. Of we need to be able to work around this, and we need to be able to discuss what's actually allowed. Most of the frameworks we have, I want to say any because I'm Israeli, but I'll be careful. Most of the frameworks we've actually found that deal with the legalities of hackback are around the legal issues. They really miss the technical and operational aspects. So number one, we want to engage live. We want to be able to collect forensics, but on top of that, we want to be able to use any payload. So, for example, not just steal their toolset, not just collect forensics from the attacker side, but rather let's brick their devices, let's contain them, let's shut them down, let's record their sessions, let's do any number of things. Which brings us to the last point around this legal issue, which I'll discuss today, which is once you actually have the go, no go, once you actually make the decision of let's actually engage, you have other issues such as privacy laws, employment laws, the actual viability of the payload, what I would call, even though it's a loaded term, sovereignty. For example, what do the federal laws say, the state laws say, am I under terms of service for a cloud provider, a lot of things around it. So to summarize, we need to be able to talk about this, whether we call it active engagement or legal hackback. We can't just treat it as taboo. We need as an industry to be able to start doing something more active, because forget the law for a second. Ethically, we are in the right. We need to be able to start engaging.
Doug, I'm sorry, did you have questions? You had a very engaging look on your face.
I was just paying attention, but I think it's a very good thing to talk about. I know that when I've talked to a couple of people in Congress and so forth, they're very resistant to the term hackback. And I think that comes out of the dark ages of our profession, because we're still sort of just on the back end of the Wild West. And I think the key terms there are attribution and obviously fiduciary harm. But I think there's ways around it, and it's a conversation that we need to have. I was mostly just paying attention because I agree with everything that was said, and I think it's a definite conversation we need to start having. I was actually thinking about a paper I want to write now.
Now Gadi, back in the day, it's interesting, you started out by talking about an IRC client, and largely malware that was being deployed several years ago used IRC as the backdoor communications CNC channels. And there happens to be, some researchers that will go unnamed that may or may not have gotten access to an attacker's command and control channel over IRC. And it turns out you can collect some great information, I think, along the lines of what you're talking about. In other words, if something infects my computer, it makes a connection to an IRC channel, I can go on my computer, I can look inside of that process, look inside of that program, look at its files, I can figure out where it's calling back to, I can then log into that channel, and then from there potentially see all of the other systems that are connected to that channel. Is that somewhat of what you're talking about? And does that fall within the scope of legal hacking back?
I see where you're going with this. So let me take a step back, if you don't mind. I'll take a couple of minutes here, if that's okay. But feel free to cut me off at any time.
Sure. No, go ahead.
So when I spoke about Maze Hunter and our product at Cymmetria, it was essentially about, let's stay within the CFAA, let's not break any laws, but let's start actively engaging and also have the discussion about where we can work inside the law and how we need to change the law. But that really opened up a whole new avenue of discussion for us. For example, one of the things that, as you know, I've done a lot of incident response globally on the internet and in my own roles over the years. And one of the things that we're facing today is that a lot of the things we do today in regular day-to-day incident response are actually illegal. Again, depending on country. So one example is, say you're under attack right now and you're trying to mitigate it, you're trying to do incident response. And you detect malware on your computer trying to connect out to a command and control drop zone. And let's say that command and control drop zone is Gmail or GitHub or something of the sort. So far, so good?
Yep, I'm with you.
Do you think you have the legal right to connect with these credentials that are obviously fake and obviously used to attack you and check it out?
Yeah, and going back to my IRC channel, that's exactly what some people may or may not have done.
Well, the whole reason you're asking the question is because the answer is no.
It depends on jurisdiction, again, but the answer is no. And every single day, if you want to perform incident response today, if you want to do your job, if you want to maintain your network, you have to. Let me share, you want to be within the law, but the law doesn't allow you to do your job, and your job is necessary because nobody else protects you. So what are you going to do? Another example for this is, and actually just to elaborate on this point a little bit, say you were actually allowed to do it. Say you were actually allowed to connect with those credentials. What happened if you found information belonging to a different company? Or worse, private information belonging to people that are not you? You just broke the law again, and with GDPR, it's even more insane. So, for example, if you just wanted to go through log files, which is what we do every single day in security, then if you were about to possess or process, not to mention look through, filter out private information, you're already breaking a lot of regulations and maybe some laws. There is a lot of stuff we do today necessary for our work that are considered illegal. And the people who create the policies do not understand the technical aspects and usually create them based on understanding of the law rather than technical or operational requirements. So for me, it's a much bigger issue that we as an industry need to deal with as opposed to just saying, hack back.
Yeah,
because I'm curious. A lot of people would consider what I just say to be hackback.
I'm really curious because I was actually involved in a case in 2001, 2002, where there were people on the internet breaking into systems at the university, and I observed that behavior. I went to those systems. I did forensics on those systems. I got their toolkit, and lo and behold, there were credentials, as you were describing, Gadi, to, in this case, an FTP server that contained a lot more of their malware and tools. And so I collected that information, and I don't know. I think I actually did make a connection to the FTP server and pull down some of their tools to take a look at them, not realizing I could be in violation of some kind of law. I'm assuming statute of limitations is probably passed by now. But I did that, and I presented on that. I worked in collaboration with law enforcement. Now, I'm not sure if law enforcement had a warrant in that situation to go do that, but the folks were convicted. It was actually an international case, but the folks were convicted. And so, again, just raising his hand, so that was just an instance in my career where I've run up against this.
So let me start by saying I just earned my white hat hacker status, so I'm really bothered by this whole discussion. I feel like I need to take it off already. And let me preface my comments with I'm sort of agnostic on this. I'm not coming into this conversation with a preconceived opinion, so my opinions are being formulated on the fly. What I'm hearing, and a couple comments and maybe a question or two. What I'm hearing is more like what you guys are doing somebody else might call monitoring, but I'm sure there's technical differences in what you do. But you started off by describing this idea of a matrix in the two extreme corners, and then very quickly you jump to the gray area. So one question I would have is in terms of how much you can talk about your tools and techniques. How much are you, because you didn't really say how much you're venturing into any of those gray area, middle ground areas versus staying clearly in the bounds of the top left corner versus obviously not going down to the lower right. But what I'm hearing overall is this is a legal question, or this is a gray area, mostly because the law hasn't caught up or kept up. Which reminds me of two stories. One is that in the early days of doing all this pen testing, hacking, getting people connected to the internet, the legal recommendation that often went out was if you're trying to hack and you get in and you encounter a shell, you enter get some sort of a login screen, the recommendation for the customers was don't put a whole lot on that. I'm fuzzy on the details because it was so long ago. But basically, if you put a message of the day or a banner on saying, use of this, sort of like a consent message or something, there was some belief that was some sort of a legal protection. Mm. But and I'm probably getting that messed up. I should Google it and find out what I'm really talking about. But Paul, you reminded me of another story. One of the original members of the pit, who shall remain nameless. But he, when he went out into the private sector, he was basically doing some work back for the places where we came from, and he was doing a forensic exercise where he came across some details of whoever it was he was investigating. He found credentials to log into an FTP server, which we used to call a wares server. Mm-hmm. Where people were keeping their payloads and their and things like that. And he's like, oh shoot, I'll log on to this FTP server, and maybe I can find some evidence or indicators of who the perpetrator is. Turns out that FTP server was known by the customer, which was another 3-letter agency, and it'd probably be better not to say who the 3-letter agency was. But so when my friend logged on, he was being monitored, and he literally had FBI agents showing up at his door with in the middle of the night after several hours because they thought they'd caught the actual perpetrator. And the irony. And this was very disturbing, obviously. He had all of his computers confiscated. It took him years to get through all the legal red tape and the bureaucracy, because ironically, the same 3-letter agency that had hired him to do the forensics was also the same 3-letter agency that allegedly detected the hacker and had caught the guy, wow. which was my friend. So, a classic case of bureaucracy in the left hand not knowing what the right hand was doing, and a lot of it was predicated on it was the early days, and there was no not only law, but there was just no procedure. There was no set formula for how do you go about doing any of this stuff. So interesting conversation. I still am kind of open-ended, but I'm a little bit dubious, I would say, of the but it's a good hacker methodology is, let's take advantage of the lack of legal definition and see how far we can play and push the envelope. I might have done some of that in my career. Mm-hmm. So
now, Gadi, the techniques that you're describing that Maze Runner, your product, is doing, in the framework that you put together in your blog post, are you connecting back to the attacker's infrastructure, or are you just collecting the attacker's tool set? Or is there what's the other step other than collecting their tool set?
So nothing happens outside of your own network.
Okay.
That is very critical to say, because that would be illegal. And and unethical, right? But the idea is, number one, let's collect the tools. So, you know what? I'm going to connect back with what our friend here just said. And there is a divide today between hackback and incident response, and I don't believe in that divide. I think that there is a spectrum of incident response, and at some point, you move over to the attacker side. It's that simple, and you decide on the level of aggressiveness that you want to take. And as long as you do it within your own infrastructure, there shouldn't really be any restriction per se. So you can connect back and say, let's take the tool set. You can see what they try to steal from you. You can turn the documents into honeydocs. You can brick their machine. You can do whatever it is you would like to do. And you can do it live with an attacker that's engaging you right now. And if I can go a little bit more into how cyber deception works if you're interested in seeing how that plays together. But to tie it back to what you just mentioned, I'll say that you can just essentially choose whatever payload you would like to run on your own infrastructure that has been taken over as a bastion host or bastion infrastructure for the attacker inside your own network.
Hey, I appreciate the insight that you provided, and it's good to hear that that's approach you take, but I can't help thinking this is like those commercials where you see, it's a car commercial and you see some test driver, driving the car at amazing speeds through the hills of California, and the little disclaimer at the bottom is, this is a closed track, this is a professional driver, don't do this at home type of thing. How do you guys, what's your opinion or your view on putting a capability in the hands of people that may or may not be have the appropriate skills or even countenance to control their activities? Or do you somehow build in the limitations to the product itself?
Good question.
You should think about it more as a provisioning system. Your provisioning system can control any remote computer that you would like using credentials if it has them. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're allowed to go and format computers that you control and have administrative passwords for, and you're willing to take that risk, and you have 100% confirmation this is actually an attacker taking over this particular host, what is the big deal if, I'll add a little bit of a note over there about why we actually put technical safeguards in place and it shouldn't be a concern. But say it was a concern. What's the big deal about you formatting your own computer?
Yeah, and that happens all the time today. That's happened since, I started doing incident response and, 16 years ago or whatever. When you found a computer that was compromised, you'd format it. You take it off the network and format the drive.
And that was exactly the issue. For you to do incident response, you had to, if you remember back in the day, it's still the case in many investigations, you have to replicate the hard drive with the court-approved software, right? You have to do it bit by bit. And you lose so much time, so much effort. You need to put in people. The attacker is long gone. Their tools might be gone. So would you agree for me to go for a couple minutes into how cyber deception works?
Yeah, sure.
Sure, it'd be great.
Okay. So we all know about honeypots, right?
Mm-hmm.
And honeypots are a cool tool, but that's what they are. They stopped development really in the early 2000s, maybe late 90s. It's a tool that allows you to catch bots and some automated tools that are scanning you. But the concept behind it, deception, has been around forever. It's a basic. When people talk to me about basics and they talk about patch management, I go, I'm not a chief patching officer. I'm a chief information security officer. Patching matters. Let's do more of it. But I'm always going to miss 30 unpatched systems or something like that. It's always going to happen in a large organization. Mm-hmm. So for me, when we talk about the basics, I think about strategy. What is missing today in the asymmetry that we face? If we go through it, we have, going to strategy for a minute, if you don't mind. We have, for example, the agility of the attacker. They can choose to attack anywhere they like. They can shift tactics. We have our static nature, where we deploy our defenses and then just leave them there. We have the budget. They need less. We have their need to succeed only once, but we have to succeed every single time, hence risk management. Where am I going to put my effort in? So looking at all of this, I figure Basics are also about what's the higher ground? Can I move around? Can I use the defender's advantage? All the basics of strategy we don't do today. And cyber deception answers that. The way cyber deception works is essentially counterintelligence. If we look at 10 years of APT investigations, I always say 10, it's 9 years since the Aurora incident in 2008. We can see consistently in these investigations that when they walk in, they look for your credentials, your shares, your cookies. Where does the user already go? What's whitelisted? What's the persistent path? They don't just go in port scan usually. They don't want to get caught. So essentially, they go in, they collect intelligence, which is your information to decide where they're going to go to next. Now, if I control my information, if I control my credentials, my shares, my cookies, if I control the information the attacker makes a decision by, talking about the OODA loop here, right? Then I control them. So they break into my network, they get a beachhead on one machine, they escalate privileges, they look at where does this guy usually go? Here's an RDP credential, here's an SSH key, here's a cookie to PHP my admin. Let's follow through. And if they choose the wrong one, even once, on any endpoint, anywhere across the network, if they go and try to use responder, if they do anything on the network, any lateral movement, any pivoting, they do. If they choose the wrong thing even once, they're done. They're connecting to my asset instead. Now, at that point, what I essentially did is I left breadcrumbs around that created a new path for them. And when they reach a decoy, it's not a honeypot. It's there was no agent, just data, and this path was leading to a decoy. The decoy is essentially a real machine, real operating system, real service, and it's fully monitored, it's fully instrumented. So now if somebody connects to that box, that could happen, right? Then I have that information about the connection. Next up, I would have the breadcrumb they used, which could be from the same machine, could be from a different machine. I would have the commands they ran. I would have the malware they downloaded. I would have the memory dump, the network traffic. I would be able to connect back and take their tool set. So I have forensics from the attacker side as well, hence what we started talking about. I would have all that information and a confirmation of a live attacker on my network right now. So I already know of 2 systems they compromised, potentially. I know of my system where I already have their toolset and potentially the second stage toolset. I have a live connection for them right now. I connect to their machine and I take their toolset inside my own network. So cyber deception is very powerful. And in fact, we already caught 5 nation-state APT attackers using this technique. So that is what cyber deception is. It's counterintelligence, it works, and it's pretty awesome. So when I get back to your question about all of this, if somebody follows a breadcrumb and they connect to my decoy and they're connected right now using my computer on my network to connect to my decoy on my network, and then I say that computer is now infected, usually I would go take it offline and try to do it forensics, which would take me a long time. Now I can just do it live, and I'm willing to risk that computer getting formatted, for example. It won't, because that's not the payload I'm running, but that is essentially what I'm doing. I am not connecting outside the network or risking anything that you would not be willing to risk.
I think the big difference here in what you're talking about and what we're talking about, just straight up, is essentially, and I'm not sure anybody can even see me, but I had a power outage. I think the big issue is the term hackback. I think if you went and you talked to a lot of people in Washington that don't really have the intricate level of understanding of all this that all of the people here do, I think what they're going to perceive this as is a hackback means I'm attacking you. I'm physically going after your networks to do damage as a vendetta because of things you did to me. I think if we could cash this conversation the way that Gadi just did it, and talking about collecting of data, protecting yourself, and these kind of things, we would have a lot more success in talking to people about hackbacks and then using this sort of defensive discussion and trying to change the language on that. You're going to have more success, because what you're talking about doesn't sound illegal to me, and I'm not an attorney, so I can't make that determination, but it doesn't sound illegal to me. When we talk about, I got a little piece of information, I took that tidbit and I fired back, that's when I start thinking, oh yeah, this is a problem.
Right, and it's the back piece that I think that God is not talking about, right? That's not so the way John Strand used to describe it, because John lives in the middle of nowhere in South Dakota, which all you guys were just there. I unfortunately couldn't make it, but people used to be where John is and set up mining shacks, right, where they would put all their equipment. They would put the mining shack in the middle of nowhere, probably near John's house in South Dakota. And they would rig, when you open the door, if you weren't authorized, a shotgun would fire and blow you away. And the law deems that is not cool. That's against the law.
You're talking about Castle Doctrine?
Yeah. Yes. Similar, right? But it's illegal to set traps that cause harm to people. And we had other legal cases where people were convicted where they had set traps for people. Some hilarious examples, actually. But what we're talking about in terms of deception and collecting information, in addition to just leading an attacker down a false path, collecting information along the way, we're not going back to the attacker and causing harm. And I think that's one of the big differences, at least in the way I've assessed, this technology.
And I completely agree with that, because I think that's where the language has confused everyone, in the sense that people are listening to hack back.
Right.
And they're saying, this person attacked you. Now I'm going to actually go take them out, and I'm going to. And that was an old school idea. I mean, that was, I'm going to go denial of service your networks. I'm going to show you that I know you're there. But that's not what we're talking about. So I think one of the most important things we can do here is change the language. And I think at the very beginning of this call, we were talking about how do we, change that term. And instead of calling it hackback, I think we need to call it cyber defense, which is a really different sounding thing.
Right.
But I know that if you go talk to the congressman or some of those people right now and you say, what do you think about hackbacks? Because I heard him do this at an exercise. He got very incensed about how that was illegal and we cannot do that. So I think we have to change that language into more what Gadi's talking about, and that will help us with that in reality.
No, I agree.
Well, to dovetail on that, I think hackback is, to some degree, a marketing buzzword. It's something that people that probably aren't qualified to be talking about this talk about to try to sell things. And I've heard several variations of marketing buzz spin in our conversation today, which is fine. I understand and agree with what you're trying to accomplish, and I think that's fine. And I agree with Doug that maybe better descriptions, more clarification, more education, and an awareness, frankly, on what it is we're talking about and the nuances, given that the law isn't keeping up with and probably never will keep up with what it is that we do in terms of defense. So yes, I think it's a good discussion, and I think defining our terms and more importantly, making sure that the reading public, the customer, the prospect is understanding what it is we're talking about, which has been our problem for the entire existence of our industry, frankly.
So I encourage everyone who listened to this discussion, which I thought was fantastic. Thank you to everyone. Cymmetria.com on their blog. Has
with a C.
Cymmetria with a C.
Yep.
Gadi, I just have 5 questions for you.
Okay, just 5.
Just 5.
Just 5.
Gadi, 3 words to describe yourself.
Oops, I don't know.
If you were, that's 4, but I'll let it slide. If you were a serial killer,
Don't know. I said don't know.
don't know. I gotcha. If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Baby Cthulhu.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
What's on my table? Let me take a look. Naked Moleskin.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
Third.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
There is a guy called Paul. I think he runs a podcast of sorts.
Who's your daddy?
And there is another guy. And let me choose somebody. John Strand.
That's interesting. set of parents. You
You decide who the mommy is. You decide who the mommy is.
It's all right. It's just two parents. It doesn't matter gender in that scenario. That's
There you go.
frightening. You chose John and I. But hey, Gadi, thank you very much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly. It was wonderful having you.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the discussion.
Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching. That's this episode of Paul Security Weekly, over and out.